I just felt really scared and shy, and the world is not a safe place. And by the time I was 18 years old, I was pretty much a full-blown drug addict, mostly cocaine and speed, and my life had become an absolute train wreck. One week that I didn't eat the entire week, he didn't really understand. And I was pretty good at hiding it too. It's a solution to pain. If you're depressed or anxious or lonely or sad, feeling hopeless, there's nothing wrong with wanting to get out of that state. It's how you go about scratching the itch. And so I believe addiction is caused by mostly trauma. It's a response to trauma. And we live in a bit of a culture that has a lot of seductive ways to increase dopamine, from internet to porn to gambling to gaming to food to drugs, alcohol.
Joe Polish's life journey is a remarkable one. From being a former carpet cleaner struggling with addictions and living in poverty, he defied the odds to become a millionaire before the age of 30. As the visionary founder of Genius Network, he has created one of the most exclusive groups for entrepreneurs worldwide.
Okay, how many of you would never raise your hand no matter what question you're ever asked? Okay.
Joe's unique gift lies in his unparalleled ability to connect with people from all walks of life. Leveraging his networking prowess, he has brought together industry transformers and global leaders, including renowned figures like Tony Robbins, Richard Branson, and addiction expert Dr. Gabor Mate. With such remarkable connections, Joe is often regarded as one of the most influential and connected individuals on the planet. Drug use disorders are affecting a staggering number of people worldwide, with approximately 36.3 million individuals grappling with dependencies on drugs and other substances. Joe's story of overcoming personal challenges and achieving extraordinary success serves as an inspiring example for those facing their own struggles.
And this guy literally just busts into the apartment where we're at with a can of lighter fluid and starts spraying lighter fluid all over the freaking house. Like, I'm gonna fucking torch this place.
Alcohol is a major risk factor for more than 200 diseases and injuries, including liver damage, cancer, and mental health disorders.
The best thing I know how to do is to bring people together in communities, because the opposite of addiction is connection.
Almost all addictions involve binging and purging. It's either excess or it's deprivation. So for instance, my core addiction was sex addiction.
In this episode, I have the privilege of sitting down with Joe to dive deep beneath the surface of glitz and glamour, and what unfolds is a remarkable story of resilience, love, and unwavering determination to create a positive impact.
It's like sitting with someone who's dying and you want to be able to fix them, and you want to be able to help them, and you want to be able to take the pain away.
Joe's journey is one of defying all odds and embodying both success and compassion.
I want to be a hero to people that are entrepreneurs, because I think they're the ones that are responsible for providing jobs, creating tremendous innovations, and I want to help people that struggle with addiction, because I am both of those things.
Hi Joe, how are you?
I am doing wonderful. How are you doing? I'm in Arizona, you're in Dubai. It's like across the world, but I'm doing good.
Yeah, that's the wonderful thing about the digital age, right? We can be anywhere in the world and still be able to access each other. Yep. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the Be That Life podcast. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Good to be here.
So, Joe, I want to ask you something really related to your childhood days, your early years. Kids really begin forming explicit childhood memories around the 2-year mark, and then the majority of their implicit memories really start to develop at the age of 7. All right. Now, I'd like to take a step back to when you were at the age of 7 and really start talking to me about your journey at that age and then progressing from there.
Well, just so you'll know, my childhood is mostly a blur, just a few handfuls of memories. I remember my mother died when I was 4 years old. So she was a former nun, and she had left the convent because she had gotten ill. And I have one brother who's 4.5 years older than me. And I have no memories prior to the age of 4, except a slight memory of some group where we were in Texas, and there was a piñata that was hanging from a tree, and there were a bunch of kids, I think, hitting it with a bat, trying to bust open this piñata and get candy out of it, because that's what a piñata is. And other than that, just a very vague memory of that. And then I remember seeing my mother in the hospital when I was 4 years old. And I don't know if it was the day before she died, a week before she died, and she had tubes in her nose, and she was talking to me and my brother and saying something along the lines of, listen to your father, I love you. And of course, some of these memories come to me from just a note she had left too. So I can't tell if my childhood brain really interpreted that. I vaguely remember it. And then I remember seeing my father outside the hospital, leaning against a tree, crying, bawling his, head off, and not really knowing what to do, because, and again, at that age, I had no understanding or comprehension other than life became very scary to me at that point in time, because, my father was not, he was not okay. I didn't quite know what that meant or why, but I just knew life didn't feel very safe at the time. And so my whole childhood was one mostly of being scared and shy and introverted. And as far as 7 years old, vague memories of that. I mean, I remember going to kindergarten in Apache Junction, Arizona, which is in the Phoenix area. For people that wouldn't know, it's a little small town next to Mesa, Arizona. And I remember some kids stealing my baseball cap, and that was really difficult. I remember a teacher physically washing my mouth out with soap. They used to do that back then, shoving a bar of soap in my mouth. Playing in rocks, the desert, lizards, things like that, but very, very vague memories. And 7 years old, I guess we probably moved back to El Paso, Texas, which is where I was born. And then from after 7 years old, we moved to a small town called Alpine, Texas. So during my entire childhood, every year to 2 years, we would move, because my father was tormented from my mother dying and never felt comfortable anywhere. So we would move a lot. And and it was unfortunate, because he never really recovered from, he lost the love of his life. He was a locksmith, so we didn't make a lot of money. Half of my childhood, we lived in mobile home parks and trailers, and then, small houses and things like that. But it was, and then, after between the ages of 8 to 10, I started getting sexually abused and molested. I don't mention the person's name. It's just, it was a male, and it was that became, I think, one of the reasons I blocked out a lot of memories, because there was just a lot of angst and pain and trauma, and yeah, it was very shitty. It wasn't a very enjoyable childhood. I mean, I certainly had times where I would ride my bike and I would try to make friends, but I was a super shy, introverted kid. And right when I started to establish some friendships and some relationships, we would uproot and move to another town. And that was very difficult on me. It was difficult on my brother. And, also my father, which when you're a kid, you don't really kind of understand any of that. But looking back, he would establish a clientele, being a locksmith. And he was a hardworking guy. Probably workaholism was one of the ways he coped with just the pain of his life. And, he just never felt, he felt betrayed. My father, was in the Army. He had an honorable discharge because he had broken his right leg and injured it real severely several times. So he was on pain medications, constantly dealing with the VA, the Veterans Administration, and just was drafted when he had a really good job in the steel mills in Pennsylvania, which is found. There were a lot of people working in the steel mills and coal miners and things like that, which is what most of his brothers were. My father had 9 brothers and sisters, so he came from a big family. So he would build these businesses and he'd uproot himself and we go somewhere else. So it was a very, what's that word? Tumultuous childhood. I don't think I'm saying the word right. But it just was not good. I mean, I cannot look back at my childhood and find much of anything from teachers or people that helped me with self-esteem or feeling good about myself. I just felt really scared and shy, and the world is not a safe place. and it was pretty dark. And so that later led to, when we finally moved back to the Arizona area. I lived in, a place called Demi, New Mexico, where I think I went to 5th and 6th grade, and then came to Arizona. And then I started going to junior high school and then high school. And during that period of time, I started smoking pot and doing drugs. And by the time I was 18 years old, I was pretty much a full-blown drug addict, mostly cocaine and speed. But I was drinking and getting high and doing that on a regular basis. And my worst state was when I was 18 years old. I'd become after graduation, which I did not graduate. I graduated high school, but I never walked in the ceremony. During the night of my high school graduation, I was in the backyard of a friend's house that happened to border the football stadium of Dobson High School, which is where I graduated from in Mesa, Arizona. And I was anti-authority. I was like, screw this. I didn't want to walk. And we were freebasing cocaine from the backyard of this guy's house, watching my high school class do the ceremony. And that was so 3 months after that, after I was literally doing drugs every single day, and my life had become an absolute train wreck. And so that's when I was, I weighed about 120 pounds on average. And when you're a male at 5'10", is my height, and you weigh 105 pounds, it's skinny as a rail. And there was one week that I didn't eat the entire week, and my weight had dropped to 105 pounds, because I remember getting on the scale where I was just so messed up, and I had been just doing speed and coke and snorting it and smoking it. That's what freebasing is, the whole week.
Where was your dad during this period?
He lived in Chandler, not too far away, maybe a 15-minute drive from where I was living with a couple of other guys. And he just, he didn't really understand. He didn't really know. And I was pretty good at hiding it too. I don't know how he didn't know. I mean, he probably did. Maybe he just didn't quite understand it. I mean, he had to be going through his own, we're a family that was traumatized and never really had any good help. Not that the help maybe would have been there, but didn't know how to seek it out. And, you're talking, this is back in 1986. And in my father's generation, it wasn't like a thing for people to seek out a therapist. And if there was a woman involved, if he had ever gotten remarried, that might have added a different element, but he never did. He never remarried. He lost the love of his life, and he never got over it. And so, it was a bit of a sad situation. Now, on the positive side, that led to, I still didn't recover from addiction right away. It took a long time. I eventually looked at myself in the mirror, and I looked like a skeleton. And there was one of the pivotal moments was I was living with my brother and another guy who was, everyone was doing drugs like all the time. And when you're a drug addict, you hang out with other drug addicts. Whatever lifestyle someone's into, they seem to have relationships.
Did your brother start doing that before you started doing it, or was it just pretty much at the same time?
Yeah, he started doing it before me. Yeah.
Did you think you got the influence from your brother somehow, or was it not related at all?
No, definitely. Yeah, definitely got influence from my brother, and got influence. Now my brother's been in recovery now for many years. So, so both of us ultimately got to the path of 12 steps and doing recovery work. What ended up happening for me is that, this one person who was living with us as a roommate, he was going to, he had gotten caught trying to sell, I don't know the whole details of it. I did my best to try to, this guy was a train wreck, and he had gotten busted trying to sell drugs to an undercover police officer, or an undercover, I don't know to what degree, but I was, just kind of avoiding this guy as much as I could, because he had become very destructive. And I remember, and I was trying my best to just, looking back, I don't even know. I was trying to white knuckle my way through life, basically. And I'd come home one day, and he was is later, getting towards the evening, and he was smoking coke over a sink with a glass pipe and a torch. And I knew that he had to go to court the next day to face charges of drug possession and selling to this undercover officer. And I said, "Man, dude, you may not want to do this. Aren't you supposed to be in court?" Yeah. And I ended up going upstairs, keep myself in my room, and I ended up going to sleep. And I woke up in the morning, and I go downstairs. It's early in the morning, some like 7 a.m. And back in those days, I'm mostly nocturnal, staying up super late at night. But I happen to get up early, and I go downstairs to get a glass of water. And this guy's in a 3-piece suit with a pipe, still smoking coke. And he'd been up all night, and he had sweat, on his forehead. And I was like, and he's like, "My lawyer's outside, is going to drive me to, court." And and I'm like, Jesus Christ. And back then, I'm looking, even though I'm an addict, I'm looking at this guy like, "Are you a complete idiot? Like, what the fuck is going on here?" And now looking back, that is how difficult addiction is. There's nothing about that guy that wanted to be doing what he was doing. He was in total, addiction, anxiety ridden, hating life, scared, terrified, but just, his brain and being wanted to escape. And that was the method he was trying to soothe the pain. And it was a terrible condition. And now I look at addiction now as, it's a solution to pain. If you're depressed or anxious or lonely or sad, feeling hopeless, there's nothing wrong with wanting to get out of that state. It's how you go about scratching the itch. And so I believe addiction is caused by mostly trauma. It's a response to trauma. I've done, many interviews and conversations about that. One of my dear friends, Gabor Mate, does a really good job of speaking to that. And then my friend, Dr. Anna Lembke, wrote a book called Dopamine Nation. There are some people that are not severely traumatized that have addictions because their biochemistry is off, and they're looking for ways to get it. And we live in a bit of a culture that has a lot of seductive ways to increase dopamine, from internet to porn to gambling to gaming to food to drugs, alcohol, workaholism, which is the respectable addiction, and all the different things that people do. But, back then I was just trying to feel better, and I, didn't have a really good way of doing life. I never did sports. I was not into, academics. So, and then what ended up happening was that guy ended up going to court, going through the process. A few days later, I come home, and it's a little bit, it's later afternoon, and I'm watching TV, and this guy literally just busts into the apartment where we're at with a can of lighter fluid and starts spraying lighter fluid all over the freaking house, screaming like a maniac, something you'd see in a freaking movie. And I had long hair, and he had like sprayed, and I've got lighter fluid dripping down my forehead, and this guy, has a lighter in his hand. He's like, "I'm gonna fucking torch this place," and just screaming like a man, like just out of his mind. And I'm like, "Dude, put the lighter down," talking him down. And he's just in a manic state because his life is completely out of control. And I'm like, I'm about to freaking die here. This guy could, and at that moment I was like, I got to get the hell out of here. If I, cause I was a wreck. My life was a mess. I was so unhealthy. And I was just a drug addict. So I got in this piece of crap pickup truck that I had. I drove to Las Cruces, New Mexico. And I ended up, living in a trailer for, 2 years almost with, my father. And I got a job delivering newspapers, of all things, because they had adult paper routes back then. And I was used to staying up all night. So this job sort of started at around midnight, and it would be delivering papers late at night, and, go to bed at the, wee hours. And I would stay up most of the night and sleep in the morning. And I started going to college at New Mexico State University. And then I ultimately got a job at a fitness place called Tom Young's fitness center, which I think is still there. And this is, God, this is so many years ago. I'm 55 years old.
I don't I don't think that I actually have ever heard you say the reason why you decided that you were gonna, kind of like change your life. So it's interesting to hear it from you now, because I didn't know the actual reason behind why you just woke up one day and be like, I want to just make a difference. I just don't want to do this anymore. And to hear it from you now was just there was just that crazy situation that happened in your life that made you like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. I actually want to live. I want to have a life and I want to do something different. Okay, now I want to ask you, like, addiction really often co-occurs with mental health disorders, as you would know this. Like, it's really estimated that approximately 50% of individuals with severe mental health disorders also experience substance abuse problems. And you work in recovery, you would know this. Now I want to take a step back and talk about Amy Winehouse, because she was someone that I really loved in terms of her music. She was supremely talented, exceptional voice, tragically died too early, right? So she died in 2011, but prior to her passing away tragically in 2011, she had a really close encounter in 2007, where she basically overdosed on cocaine, heroin, meth, ketamine, and she pretty much had to cancel the rest of her shows that year. So she has been going through this onward battle for such a long time. And when I've done my research on her, read her story, knowing what you know today and having gone through so many different similar paths, what do you think would you have done to have helped her?
Well, that I don't 100% know, because without knowing her and being there with her, and I've worked with quite a lot of people that have fame, and what happens with a lot of people that have high status, oftentimes lots of money, lots of access, they have a lot of handlers, and in the throes of their addiction, oftentimes when someone famous like Michael Jackson or Kurt Cobain or Robin Williams, which at first they thought was addiction and stuff, but that's a whole nother brain condition. And say Jim Morrison or Jimi Hendrix or any of the people like Amy Winehouse that died at 27 years old. There's the 27 Club. There's a
Yes.
lot of people that Prince is an example. Tom Petty. You have a lot of musicians. You have a lot of actors and actresses that.
Avicii is another one. Avicii was another situation too.
Yeah, absolutely. They have a lot of handlers, and so in order to be an active addiction and live a double life, you have to lie, cheat, and steal. It's rare that people don't, and even if they don't say I'm lying, cheating, and stealing, they're doing it to themselves. They're it's really you're in shame when you're in addiction in most cases, and so you're in this vicious cycle. You're doing stuff because you just want to feel better. Humans, addiction or no addiction, what humans want, you, me, everybody. This is sort of a simplification about it. I write about this in my book, but humans want more woo and less ah. So all
Yeah.
the woo woo, all the things we do. Let's look at the internet. Let's have sex. Let's work. Let's gamble. There's all these adrenaline rushes. There's all these ways of feeling excited, and the addict brain is looking for love in all the wrong places. And so, what would I have done? I mean, to whatever degree that you can't often control an out of control freight train. What you can do is try to enroll it or invite it onto different rails, or to slow down if it's going too fast, or to make different decisions. Part of it is they need community. So like I've written 2 books on addiction recovery. I think they're behind me on the bookshelf somewhere. One is the Miracle Morning for Addiction Recovery that I did with Hal Elrod and Anna David. And then another little red book back that says Understanding Addiction Recovery. And it's a compilation of some of my interviews. But what I've learned about addiction is there's 4 things that people need in order to get sober and stay sober. The first is they need community. And community of people that care about them and are not actively involved in addiction. And the problem with celebrities and famous people and having money is you have access to almost anything that your addict brain can come up with. As a matter of fact, having money and fame and notoriety and people wanting to please you is one of the worst possible things that a person could have. So, intentionally or not, agents, employees, lawyers, doctors that are oftentimes treating or working with famous people are the enablers and the facilitators. Many of them are not bad people. Tony Hsieh was a friend of mine, the founder of Zappos. And the last conversation I had with him was when we were both at TED, and I was up in this very big suite that he would rent, and he would have people come over, they would, have parties and events and meetings there. And, he'd ask me, what had I been up to? And, this is probably 10 years after I first met Tony. I'd interviewed him at Zappos. I'd gone to Burning Man and hung out with him there. We had, had, a few dinners and hangouts. And when he came to Phoenix on his Delivering Happiness tour, and, Tony was always smoking and drinking and, partying. And he had a lot of people who he set up that so he would have the people around him that would do what he wanted them to do, intentionally or not, manipulating the situation. And there just was not enough people that were really looking out for Tony. But at the same time, you're a billionaire. He was a billionaire, and he had plenty of, he could do a lot with that money. So it was a very unfortunate situation. So for Amy, so community is the first thing. The second is its biochemistry, food, nutrition, proper supplementation. You work a lot with the gut, right? So 80 to 90%.
But she was bulimic. She suffered with bulimia, so she wasn't actually eating, and she had problems with that as well. So it's really hard to control that particular disorder and then have an addiction to everything else that you're addicted to, including having everyone talking about you all the time, from the fame aspect to it. So having eating disorder, having the addiction to drugs, and then alcohol, and then the fame, it's very difficult, right? So sure, community is everything. The day that she died, the day before, she told her doctor she didn't want to die. So it was out of her control. She wasn't herself.
Yeah.
She wasn't capable.
Well, and the question is, what is herself? What does that what did that mean to her? Well, let's take bulimia. Let's take an eating disorder, because it's a good way to think about it. Almost all addictions involve binging and purging. It's either excess or it's deprivation. So for instance, my core addiction was sex addiction. And when people hear sex addiction, most people would think, oh, that means you want to have a lot of sex, or you're, you just have this insatiable appetite for sexual behavior or whatever sexual acting out is. A big part of sexual addiction is sexual anorexia, where you have a hard time being sexual because of the shame or whatever's associated with it. So there's binging and purging behavior in everything. It's either excess or deprivation. There's that line about cocaine is, the shortest line is too long and the longest line is never enough, right? So no matter how much you do, you just don't ever feel like it is enough. And, so for instance, a work addict is working all the time, but they're also depriving themselves of sleep, oftentimes depriving themselves of other forms of joy and relaxation. And they're in almost all addicts are dealing with identity, because, guilt is I feel bad. Shame is I am bad. And most addicts at a core level, oftentimes at worse levels, hate the vessel that they're in. There's one person right now who has a son that is in a treatment center that I had recommended, and I get updates on what's going on. And this person, her son, does not hates himself. Currently now, hopefully in treatment, which is happening as we speak, this person can esteem themselves, and they could find ways to tap into starting to, find, meaning and respect with who they are. And that has to go through some deep, trauma work and to getting to a point, because I hated myself. I had low self-esteem. I had low self-worth. And when I was raped and molested as a kid, I was paid money to not say anything about it. And so I felt like just this worthless person who is, just a piece of shit human. And that that feeling was never in, a thought that I had until I had that sexual abuse, and then it became humiliation, embarrassment, shame, and and it wasn't what happened to me. It was not having any way to process what happened to me. So the guilt and the shame and the trauma oftentimes is, everyone to a degree has had very difficult things happen in their life. It has challenges, has gotten bullied, had gotten betrayed, had been, many people, was way more than most people would imagine, have been sexually, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually abused. And when I tell my story, I always want to put it in context too, that I was victimized as a child, and as an adult, many people are victims. We're all victims at some time, way, shape, or form. Some are victimizers. It's not that you don't have bad things happen to you; it's what you do with it afterwards. And when you become an adult, it is your responsibility to do something with it. If you're at the place where you can make decisions, because I believe addiction is not a choice. There is a point where it is beyond choice. There are moments, though, where you can make certain choices, and that's where you have to resource yourself and esteem yourself. And that's usually going to come in the form of connection with others. That's why I talk about community first, second is biochemical, third is the underlying trauma work, and the fourth is the environment. So if you work on those four things, you have the best chances of not only escaping addiction. I have something on the wall. I should go grab it. I'm gonna
Grab it.
yeah,
Grab it.
I'm gonna show you this. Yeah, so as I'm yelling to the microphone, so I helped a friend of mine get out of the trap of this addiction life she had, and she painted this for me probably. Oh, this goes back to 2009, and I helped her with her addiction, and it says sobriety didn't open up the gates of heaven to let me in, but it sure did open up the gates of hell to let me out.
Wow,
And
that's really good.
yeah, so the and that was actually a quote I'd shared with her early on in addiction, where recovery doesn't make life immediately better for you. It just leads a path. And what there's a book written by Ernie Larson. I don't know when it was written, many years ago, but it was stage 2 recovery. So what most people think of in recovery and addiction treatment is, getting sober. So that's stage 1, though, stopping the drugs, the alcohol, the behaviors, the process addictions, which all encompass, everything from eating disorders to sexual acting out to internet to gambling, gaming, extreme exercise, because the Johan Hari line is really great, which is the opposite of addiction is connection. So addiction is a connection disorder. And if you're disconnected, as Amy Winehouse was, she's going to look for ways to try to feel better. Janis Joplin, who also overdosed, famous musician, she had a line where she said, "I would go make love to 20,000 people" when she was performing on stage, but then I'd go back to my hotel room alone. So there are people that are world famous that, and I've sat with a few of them, that millions of people listen to their music or watch their games or watch their movies or admire them, that have, in some cases, dozens, if not hundreds of employees, uh, entire enterprises built around them, and they feel totally alone. And it's really sad, because oftentimes the people that are really trying to help them, they shut them out. Do they intentionally do that? Sometimes. Other times, the addict, when I was a cocaine addict, I would wake up every day and get high, and I'd get high to go to bed. It was uppers in the morning, downers in the evening, drinking alcohol at night to just, inebriate myself. And I didn't want to do any of that any more than I don't think any addict wants to be in the throes of addiction. But I'll tell you, like, when you feel really disconnected and life sucks and you feel hopeless, addiction works. It works in the moment. And so,
You say You said that you're really close friends with Dr. Gabor Mate. He's someone that I've been following for a long time. I love his work. I love what he talks about, and he did say something which is, I think, really important. Is on the point that you talked about when it came to connection. So the human brain is really wired for connection, right? And
Yeah.
in the absence of these healthy connections, it will bond with anything that offers relief for that pain.
Yes.
So addiction isn't just about like I want to go and get high. I want to find something that will help me relieve my pain. So as someone who has really experienced both the highs and lows of life and business, and what advice would you give, like now that you know so much, what advice would you give your younger self today?
Well, when I was reaching for things that were, I said this the other day, that if there wasn't this thing called consequences, living in some of the behaviors or things that you're doing when you're an addict can actually be quite fun. It's fun to go have sex. It's fun to sometimes depends on who it's with and how. It's fun to get a buzz, and except when you're puking and you're sick and throwing up. So if there's not this thing called consequences, many of the behaviors that lead to people destroying their lives, people would do more of them. The challenge is when you're disconnected and you're doing that all the time, you don't even know what connection feels like because you're having an artificial connection with it. I mean, some people are addicted to plastic surgery. Some people are addicted to tattoos. And what I mean by addicted, it's like they get a dopamine hit. I mean, there's a lot of, when you take sexual stuff, because I have done a lot of work in that arena. I got an interview with Pat Carnes, who's the top sex addiction doctor in the world. That we did that interview probably in 2011. People can watch it on YouTube. Everyone has an arousal template. And so whatever you're introduced to that gives you pleasure, you have a template, you have a patterning in your brain, and you actually want to seek it out. So what I would have told my younger self is get help a lot earlier. Deal with my traumas, deal with the shit that happened to me. If you feel, if you feel shitty, if you don't feel okay in the world. And most addicts do not feel okay in the world. And I would deal with the things that had the traumas, because I never worked through those. So I spent a good chunk of my adult life. It wasn't until really my mid 40s where I started seeing some longer periods of relief. I've been in recovery for over 25 years at this point, and I've been to, maybe it's in the thousands range of meetings, support groups. I've spent $500,000 on therapy. I've done 30-day inpatient treatments. The last one I did was 2002. My father also died that year, and after he did, I acted out, because when people lose their father as men, even if they don't have a good relationship with them, there's a high percentage of people that struggle with addiction that have relapses. And so what I did say about, let me finish the thought I want to come back to. I was saying stage 2 recovery is dealing with so stage 1 is getting sober. And that's what most people think of as recovery. I quit drinking. But that term dry drunk, there's a lot of dry drunks running around. They quit drinking, but they're still got the same asshole behaviors that, they were when they were drinking, and their lives are out of control and they're unmanageable. Stage 2 recovery is dealing with the underlying emotions and traumas and things that cause you to act out addictively in the first place. But again, if from my perspective, and I'm totally open to being wrong, I constantly question my current level of understanding and consciousness, and everything I'm talking about right now, Mary, is just what I currently understand and I believe to be true. But a belief means you're just not sure. When someone's like, I believe in God, are you sure? Is there really a God? What does that even mean? So a lot of people hold on to erroneous beliefs as if they're absolute facts. And so I always try to look at everything that I say and do and think with a beginner's mind. I'm always looking for ways to see, where am I wrong? Where am I not really understanding this? And addiction is a very complex thing. Gabor Mate is an example. I've got a couple great interviews with Gabor. His new book, The Myth of Normal, that book came about because I brought a guy named Ben Hardy over to Gabor's home in Vancouver. I was just with Gabor, 2 weeks ago at his house in Vancouver. And I brought Ben Hardy, who's a really amazing author, and he connected him with, Gabor's current agent, and that led to Gabor's, newest book. But I read a bunch of stuff on trauma. I've interviewed a lot of therapists. I've one of the top addiction therapists in the world, Ken Wells, writes the blog for geniusrecovery.org, which is my addiction foundation. The goal of that is to, change the global conversation about how people view and treat addicts with compassion instead of judgment, and find the best forms of treatment that have efficacy and share it with the world. So what I would have done is I would have been more compassionate with myself. And so I tried to do that today with Amy Winehouse. Love them, do your best to help if you can, guide, direct them, bring really strong community to someone that's struggling with addiction. And here's the problem. If you are an addict yourself, or if you have family members or friends or employees that are struggling with addiction and they're causing a lot of pain and angst and stress in your life, sometimes you're so close to them that it's really hard to love somebody that is lying to you, cheating, stealing, being a total pain in the ass. And that's where you need to resource yourself and kind of step away oftentimes from it and not get enmeshed in codependency, because there's no such thing as just a single alcoholic or sex addict or workaholic. There's all kinds of things that they're doing that are addictive behaviors. There's usually a core addiction, but it's rare for me to find all they do is cocaine. No, they're doing a bunch of other shit too. And they've got a whole life built around it. But what the stuff they're doing is not the problem. A war on drugs is like a war on addicts. It's the wrong war. We don't need a war on drugs. We need a drug against war. Okay. And that drug is going to be love, and it's going to be compassion. And, these are easier said than done. So I understand a lot of the things here. What I will say, though, is that addicts become pleasure deaf, and normal things like going for a walk with your kids or by yourself or just looking at the sunset. When someone's mired in addiction, they may look and be around and be like, I don't understand why everyone is finding this so meaningful. I need more stimulation. And so when you stop that's a problem with, let's say, internet, in the internet influencer world, right? Okay, you have a big following. You have over 1 million people that follow you on one of your Instagram, pages. And the challenge with young people is if they, one of the challenges for young people, not with young people, is we live in a culture that is constantly selling status instead of growth. And when I was,
Totally.
I want people to look at me. I want, I'm a heterosexual male. It would be really great if, women found me cool and attractive when I was a young guy and wanted to, listen to what I had to say, go out on dates with me, find me, whatever appealing in whatever ways I want to be appealing. It's very seductive to want people to like you, look at you. And what happens is they want people to lust after them. And we live in a culture where, 86% of young people in America, I don't know, and this probably changes on a day-to-day basis. And God knows what the pandemic had, that nonsense. And I say nonsense from the standpoint of the level of fear porn and propaganda and bullshit that was fed out and still is fed out through social media and fed out, to the world. Is it paints this picture of, build status. So 86% of young people, when asked what do they want to do, I want to be a YouTuber, I want to be a blogger, I want to be famous, I want, and look, I mean, being famous, there's advantages and benefits to that. But I'll tell you, I know a lot of famous people. And if you don't know who you are when you get into the business, like my friend Glenn Morshar said, it will misinform you. If you get into the acting business or the entertainment business without really knowing who you are, it will misinform you. And that's let's go back to Amy Winehouse. Put yourself in her shoes. Which I can't. I can only observationally. I don't ever try to pretend I know what it's like to live in someone else's shoes, because unless I've lived their life, I don't know their life. Like my friend Dr. Don Wood, he's a great trauma therapist, and he is one of my Genius Network members, and I write about him in my book, What's in It for Them, that's my latest book. And he has this great line where he said, if you understood the atmospheric conditions of somebody's life, it would make sense why they do what they do, who they are. And what I've learned is that the atmospheric conditions of my life led to a lot of addiction, a lot of pain, a lot of struggle, a lot of angst, a lot of denial, a lot of self-hatred, many hours of, suicidal ideation and contemplation. A couple of times where I was very close. I've had guns in my mouth, struggling with pulling the trigger. There's been very dark nights of the soul. There's been a lot of crap that has come out of it. And through the journey, life wants to live. When you see a weed or a flower trying to grow through asphalt, there's something about life. Humans want to live, animals want to live, life wants to continue. So when you want it to end, what is going on in the being? And so I believe you can change the atmospheric conditions of your own life. That can be an example to other people, and you can help guide the weather conditions. The booby trap, though, is to not become an enabler, not to become codependent. Ken Richardson is the founder of Codependence Anonymous. He's a friend of mine. He actually lives here in North Scottsdale. So he founded CODA. So there's CODA meetings because almost all addictions have, they have codependency, right? And I asked him, why did you, create, Codependence Anonymous? He goes, well, I was, I think he was one of the main directors at the Meadows, which is a treatment facility that is kind of well known out here in Arizona. And he said there's all these therapists that we were treating people all day long with addiction, but we didn't have any place to go to ourselves. And that's, and that's very insightful and aware, because a lot of people that try to help other people with their mental issues have a lot of their own mental issues, their own mental illnesses, their own addictions, their own challenges. And so part of it is, one of the reasons I do what I do with my foundation and what I do with addiction, people give me more credit than I probably would want them to, because they look at me like some philanthropic, sweet angel sort of person. And I'm like, look, my own self-interest, this is really helpful for my own addiction. I don't make money off my foundation. As a matter of fact, I've spent a lot of money to try to build this stuff out, but I'm in a fortunate situation where I've a successful company. I've equity in 28 different companies. I've done well. I have really smart people around me. I've worked my ass off in order to develop it. And it'd be a total waste of my marketing skills if I was just selling more courses and things on how to build a business. I mean, I'm trying to do something that, really helps people that struggle with addiction, because I know the pain and the struggle and the loneliness and the angst. And there's a lot of very financially successful people that the only reason that they have built financially successful lives and businesses is it's a bit of being a lopsided loser in a lot of ways. You just don't know how to do anything else, and you can make a lot of money and you can get a lot of status, but do you care about yourself? Do you love yourself? And a lot of people don't. So I don't equate someone's financial success with a life that works versus a life that doesn't work. And so I look at my own life, what's working? How do I do more of that? What's not working? How do I address it? And in the past, I ignored a lot of yellow flags. I ignored a lot of red flags. I beat the shit out of myself, and I could hide it really well. And I can still do that today. I can be very clever about it. So I have to, I do my best to have people that will call me out on my own shit and, check yourself before you wreck yourself. And when someone's wrecking themselves, but they have no one around them that will check them or will love them or that has enough trust and rapport. And I'll tell you, the people that really love and care and treat for people that struggle with addictions, their children, their husbands, their wives, their friends, it's hard sometimes. It's really hard. And it's like sitting with someone who's dying, and you want to be able to fix them, and you want to be able to help them, and you want to be able to take the pain away, and knowing that there's only so much you can do. And some people, they will not make it. And I don't say that as a negative. It's just, I don't know if you've ever sat, Mary, with someone that, on their deathbed or when they're dying. I've had
I have, definitely.
Yeah. And they're oftentimes the very best thing you can do is just be present with them, My girlfriend is a brilliant surgeon, and she's been around so much death, and she's never lost the compassion. She's really caring and very sweet, and a lot of people aren't. A lot of doctors. I mean, I've 20% of people in Genius Network are in the health field. So I have a lot of psychologists, psychiatrists, medical doctors, functional medicine doctors, integrative doctors, naturopaths. And the interesting thing with the whole health field, because that's a lot of your world, is we live in a world where it's a pill for an ill. If you're a medical doctor, it's a medicine. If you're a functional medicine doctor, oftentimes it's a supplement. And some people over prescribe or oversell or overdiagnose, whatever. But the thing is just to not get compassion fatigue. One of the biggest dangers. I did a podcast, I don't know, probably 3-4 years ago. I was the first person that was not a medical doctor that they interviewed for this podcast. It went out to 50,000 emergency room, physicians and nurses and doctors. And my friend, Dr. Jamie Hope, who works in the ninth busiest trauma emergency room in the United States outside of Detroit, is the one that introduced me to this group. And the feedback that they got when I said, when you see someone come in as an emergency room doctor, you see addicts at their worst possible state. You see the consequences of drug driving, stabbings, gunshot wounds, hurting themselves, hurting others, overdose, totally messed up. And you're going to see this person, and immediately, you're probably going to be like, what kind of a dumbass, stupid person here I have to take care and try to save this person's life or piece them together. And they oftentimes get real compassion fatigue just being an emergency room doctor. If you see people in pain all day long, you almost have to compartmentalize what's going on in order to treat that person. And at the same time, how do you embrace the suffering that you're surrounded in? And the pain is the messenger. With connecting with people, first chapter of my book on connection is be a pain detective, because pain is a messenger. And all the people that we see in pain, your own pain, it's life trying to say, pay attention here. I need some love. I need some care. I need to get away from this environment. When you're burning yourself, move away from the flame. The weird thing with addiction is people jump into the flame. There's a part of their psyche that is, dancing with darkness. And it's, remember the band Guns N' Roses?
Yeah, I loved Guns N' Roses.
Yeah. So I used to listen to Guns N' Roses all the time when I was a kid, in college mostly. And their first album that made them very well known was Appetite for Destruction. And that's what those 3 words that very well describe addiction. It's an appetite for destruction. It's like, you know what? I have a really healthy partner that loves and adores me, but that bad boy, or that, we find people whose dents match our dents. And so
That's true.
oftentimes,
That's so true.
yeah, addiction is like, yeah, let's go fuck ourselves up a bit. Let's go do something. And it's a really complex thing, but there's so much on the other side. And so the opposite of addiction is connection. So if you think of the darkest part of life being addiction, despair, hopelessness, suicide, fear, like the only healthy form of fear is concern. All the other forms of fear, terror and stuff, they're trying to tell you something. And the bliss part of life is flow, if you can get into a flow state. So on one spectrum, if you have addiction, and the other you have flow. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote the book Flow, the Psychology of Psychology of Achievement, I can't remember, or Optimal Achievement, I can't remember the subtitle, but he was one of the first ones that wrote some of the best work on flow. And then Stephen Kotler, who's become a dear friend of mine, he's I would consider him one of the top current modern day experts of not only flow, but actually engineering and figuring out how to get into a flow state. And Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi said the same neural pathways that an addict uses for self-destruction and for addiction are the same neural pathways that the world's top performers, athletes, achievers, entrepreneurs use to get into flow. So we're using the same neural pathways. It's just one is leading to ultimate connection and the other is leading to ultimate disconnection. So if someone is disconnected and you see them doing bad stuff, there needs to, help them. First, love them, care about them, have empathy, so you don't start viewing them as a moral degenerate, because you cannot punish pain out of people. And if you're in pain, punishing yourself, hating yourself, you hear all these words too, like be gentle. That's really hard for someone that hates themselves to be gentle with something you hate. Think about it. I hate this person. I'm going to be really gentle with them. Well, the problem with addiction is oftentimes you hate yourself. So anyway, I know I'm saying a lot of stuff, but these are just some perspectives that I hope people can.
Well, you've spoken about trauma, you've spoken about addiction, you've spoken about love, you've spoken about connection. But I think a topic that most people don't really talk about is that broken children become broken adults,
Mhm.
and broken adults raise broken children.
Mhm.
So it's just really this vicious cycle that continues to go on and on. So we aren't really we're not taught how to become parents at school, right? We learn from our parents and from society and obviously from pain. And we most certainly are not given a user's manual on how to become a parent when we decide to have children.
Mhm.
Now, I I believe that in order to really be good at parenting is we need to be, taught how to become better at living our own lives, dealing with our own traumas, and to be conscious and responsible. To be a responsible, conscious parenting is that you need to heal from a lot of the things that you haven't healed from. So it really stems from that. So let's go back to the concept of marriage, right? It only existed about 1500 years ago, and with that came societal conditioning, as you would know. We need to do X things to be accepted. We need to do Y things to be considered successful. But I think the two fundamental things that people really forget into the ingredients of what becoming a better human is about is love and connection. Now, what I'd like to ask you is how can society as a whole really work towards creating a more nurturing and loving environment that really reduces the prevalence of this addiction rooted in love deprivation? Like, what role can education, can policy, community initiatives really play in addressing this particular issue? Because it isn't just about we get older and we have all of these problems. It's really learning to or really changing that global conversation, as you said. And where does this stem from? Like, how can we become conscious, responsible parents if we ourselves are not responsible? We're not healing a lot of the problems that we're healing from. What can we change? What do we need to do?
Yeah. So I don't think society's going to do anything. I think it'll be individuals within that can do something, and then the ripple effect. Like, I have this whole thing where people will often say to me, I want to change the world. And that's it sounds nice. However, I'm probably not going to change the world. I don't know, some people that do change the world, I don't know if their goal was to change the world. I think they just found a problem, or they found something that they wanted to address. They happened to do a really good job with it, and it happened to impact a lot of people. And the domino effect became the changing of the world. So I think the very best thing that we can do is be personally responsible. Because let's take the word, because you mentioned the word responsibility. When I was in active addiction, I was reacting to life. When my life is working, I'm responding to life. And that's what responsibility is. It's responding with ability. And the more that we create the ability to, if you want to be in better physical health and be responsible, you can't react and just eat every candy bar or drink every, sugary drink, like what is sodas? I mean, the biggest brand in the world is Coca-Cola. I mean, it's liquid Satan, and it basically stems from, cocaine cola. That's where, think about the biggest brand in the world. I had that conversation with Richard Branson. I was on Necker Island talking with Richard about the biggest brands. What's the biggest brand? Well, like Coca-Cola. What's one of the most respected brands? It would be, Apple. Computer would be an example. But you have these things that there are individuals and there are people that have, quote unquote, changed the world. But to take it to a community level, I think the very best thing we could do is don't handicap your kids by making their lives too easy. So oftentimes loving, caring parents, they want to take every challenge and every pain away from their kids, and that doesn't help them either. So it's a little bit of art and science, and every parent is going to fuck up. Every person is going to say the wrong things. Every human is going to go through a stage where we're self-centered, selfish, desperate, probably short, not caring. And there's others where we're going to be loving and challenging and compassionate and sweet and productive. And so try to spend more time as much as you can living in gratitude, taking care of the vessel called your body. That proverb, he or she who has their health has 1,000 dreams. He or she who does not have their health has only one. Wake up every day and be glad. I constantly think about this. There's at least, as I sit here talking to you right now, and I would put you in the same category, there's at least 3 billion people on this planet of a handful of a few billion people that their lives would be forever changed and blessed if they could trade places with me or you for an hour. It would be the greatest thing that ever happened to their entire existence. And don't, keep things in perspective. If you have a broken foot and you see someone that has 2 broken feet, it gives you perspective that or someone that's missing legs, that at least, but that doesn't make your broken foot hurt any less. You still have to take care of your broken foot. So you can't fix the world with broken hands, and you're not going to be a great parent all the time. But as a parent, as an entrepreneur, as an athlete, whatever someone is, you're going to play broken. The key, though, is not to stay broken. And the key is to not continually beat yourself into the ground, because the vast majority of people that die is from lifestyle diseases. One of the number one killers, probably number 2, of young people is suicide. With number one causes.
Yeah, but it's because they lack loving connection. It always brings us back to those 2 points, right?
Yeah.
It's they lack the love, they lack the connection. I'm going to give you an example. Like, I work with a lot of people who their partners ends up leaving them. So there's just that lack of like, hey, I still want to be a part of that family. I still want to be around for my children, and these are really successful individuals who've really made it in other parts of their life. And then their whole world comes crashing down when a situation like that. So what do we crave most as people? We crave loving connection. It will always bring us back to that. But if we are broken adults and we haven't healed from a lot of the things that we need to heal from, you can't be in a position to want to raise children because you haven't healed, because you're just going to pass on all of the trauma, all of the bitterness, all of the anger, everything to your child, which is unfair. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's where I think the major change should happen. Like, we should take a step back, self-reflect, and really put ourselves in a position of, I want to become a parent, but in order for me to become a parent and to raise a really good child and break that generational curse, I need to fix a lot of the things that's causing me pain and hurt, so that I can put my best foot forward and become the parent this child deserves.
Yeah, no, that's good. So let me say it this way, because I've had this conversation 1,000 times with people. Like, why would you call yourself an addict? Why would you say you're powerless? Because that's a part of 12 steps. Now, 12 steps is only one part of addiction. I think 12 steps is phenomenal. They've helped more people with addiction than every inpatient, outpatient book, seminar, course, therapist by a factor of multiples. So people that bash 12-step groups probably have never done the steps, probably don't really understand them. And there's a lot of people that are in recovery that are like, meetings don't work for me. And that's fine. Then go find another thing that does work, but don't discount the fact that it's free. Don't discount the fact that it's literally saved millions of people's lives, and don't discount the fact that it's available mostly in most places of the world. And if you have access to a computer, you can go to online meetings too. So what I always say to people though is that it's not an attendance program. Okay, it's a step program. And if you just go to meetings and attend, it's kind of like going to the gym and sitting on the bench and then saying gyms don't work. No one would ever go to a gym, sit on the bench, or look, observe a yoga class or a fitness class or a Pilates class or people swimming and say, swimming doesn't work, Pilates doesn't work, yoga doesn't work, or look at, eating doesn't work. I mean, well, it depends what you eat. So 12 steps is not an attendance program. It's a step program. So if you go and you get a sponsor and you do the steps, as a matter of fact, 12 steps actually work pretty darn well. And when people say I'm powerless, well, we're all powerless at something. If there was a giant grizzly bear jumped into your studio right now and was chasing after you, you could punch it, you could maybe shoot it, but physically you're probably not as powerful as that grizzly bear. And if a grizzly bear jumped in here too, I'd probably be pretty powerful. So I don't look at saying I'm powerless or I don't have control over this area of my life as some form of weakness, because we're all weak in a particular area. The key is identifying where we're strong, where we're Superman or Superwoman, and saying, there's kryptonite. There are certain things, there's certain behaviors and things that I cannot go to, because if I did, they're going to mess me up. And so here's the thing. I can look back, and this sounds absolutely crazy. I've said this line when I was speaking to young entrepreneurs, where if I would have known being successful was this much work, I would have stuck with being a loser. And
Yeah, I think like being a loser is equally as hard. Being successful is equally as hard. Which path do you decide to choose?
Yeah. And the thing is, life, like in the road less traveled, the first lines of that book is life is difficult. And yes, it's finding meaning in suffering. And I wouldn't do any of the shit so I could say, like, I had a shitty childhood, and there are people that have far worse childhoods than me. I talk to people on a weekly basis that have gone through stuff that I cannot even fathom. And it's wild to also understand that the way that I feel better when I feel like my life sucks, the way that I get out of it is I actually go and try to talk or sit with someone who's going through challenges themselves or whose life sucks worse than mine does. And the advice I would give to anyone that wants to change their community, you can be a producer, or you can be a parasite. You can contribute to society by having a strong work ethic, by finding problems that need to be solved, to get rid of this bullshit about find your passion and go follow your passion. That sounds good in a seminar, but it's kind of nonsense. What you want to do is, like Mike Rowe, who the guy that did the book or the TV show Dirty Jobs, really smart guy. That's a big spokesperson for blue collar workers and has observed and filmed people doing jobs that most people would be like, I'd never want these jobs. And he's like, these are some of the happiest people you'd ever meet because they're productive. Anything received free of charge is seldom valued. And so you want to earn, if you're in great physical health and you earn it, that esteems you. If you've been really shy and introverted and you're scared of asking somebody out on a date and you don't feel good about yourself, but you still take that fear and you face it, you start esteeming yourself. You don't get self-esteem and money and success and joy just because you want it. I mean, focusing on what you want is helpful. You get it because you do things that create and generate joy, that generate better physical health, that generate love. And that's not saying someone's not deserving of it. I think all humans are deserving of love and appreciation. Some people that have done the most horrible things in the world, hopefully they will find grace at some point. Some people have to go to prison in order to find that grace. Like my friend, Andre Norman, who I've been funding for over 5 years. He spent 14 years in maximum security prison. If people want to see who this guy is, go to andrenorman.com. I'll introduce him to you, do a podcast with him. The guy's amazing. He's a big black guy that was the number 3 gang leader in prison and, got out 25 years ago, went to Harvard, started helping kids. And, now he runs a prison in North Carolina. He's called on some of the most difficult situations. And you took a guy that would literally hurt people, stab people. He had 2 counts of attempted murder when he was in prison. He went to prison for armed robbery. I mean, he was a bad guy and he did bad things, but that was the environment he grew up in. And he found meaning sitting in solitary confinement for 2 years and totally transformed his life. So I've seen amazing phoenix rising from the ashes stories. And if anyone would have seen me in my worst state to see what I do today, it would be like, even me, I'm like, how in the hell did I pull off any of this shit? But I look back.
That's pretty impressive. It's really impressive what you've pulled off. So that's the reason why I feel like this conversation with you today was so important, because of what you have really like, what you have experienced, what you have come from, to what you have done with those challenges, those that the pain that you went through. So in your book, "What's in It for Them," I listened to it on Audible, and you speak a lot about community and the importance of community. And you did say that winning the right friends and influencing the right people
Yeah.
was the way forward. You also talked about two principles. So it's the ELF principle, which is easy, lucrative, fun relationships. You talked about the half principles, which is half annoying, hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating.
Right.
And these are types of being in the wrong kind of relationships, right?
Mhm.
So I think most people end up in communities and in relationships with people that define who they are, their worth, and they think that that's all they deserve. And putting yourself in a position where you know that you can be in a room with better people, smarter people, people who can really accelerate your life, but you don't have the confidence to get to that level. Now, your Genius Network and what you have and what you've built is really known for bringing, together like some of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world. What are some of the common characteristics and habits that you've observed among these incredibly high achievers, and what really sets them apart from others? Now, these high achievers like yourself have gone through a really colorful past as well. Like they've been faced with challenges, adversities, trials, tribulations, pain, loss, grief. So aside from your particular story, do you think like the 1% in the world of the people who've really created that different and changed their pain into success, what are the similarities? Is it just the drive to really want to become better? Did they wake up one day having a similar situation as yours that really just changed their perspective? Or is it more than that? Is it just that, the spirit of knowing that they can the spirit of not giving up? What is it? What makes them different?
Yeah, there's probably a variety of characteristics. Definitely, what I would consider successful, though, may differ from other people, and I also am very careful to not ever define what success is. For some people, it's being a great parent. Others, it's making a lot of money. Other people, it's being in great physical health. Others, it's having a deep spiritual connection. So there's many criteria. I think we measure the wrong things in society, because oftentimes we measure status and fame and notoriety as a successful person. And as you know, if you go behind, if you've ever seen a James Bond movie, or if you go to like the new Mission,
I have.
yeah, the Mission Impossible movies or things like that, you watch these movies and they're kind of cool, and there's a bunch of attractive people, and the guy gets the girl, or the girl gets the guy, or they get to this, or they save the world, or whatever. And then you sit back and you look at your life and you realize normal life is very boring. It's very mundane. There's a lot of moments, you get out of bed, you got to pee, you got to brush your teeth, you're tired. You most people wake up every day and they bumble their way through life, even with, the best of strategies and techniques. And I come to the frame that most people are, dealing with all kinds of a variety of stuff, and they care about themselves more than they give a shit about anyone else. And oftentimes people capture their attention and, that sort of stuff. But I think, if you tie it all together, the people that I think are successful is, do they operate with integrity? Do they give more than they take? There's real connecting. And then there's connecting. So try to avoid the connectors. It's like trying to avoid, the snakes in the grass that are poisonous versus the ones that are harmless, right? The ones that are sweet. And so life is filled with the mixed bags of humans all bumbling around trying to, figure out how to do stuff. So to a couple of things you mentioned, that the book, What's in It for Them, I spent 2 years on that book, and I wrote the first manuscript for it And then I decided I was going to take a 1 year sabbatical in 2021 because a friend of mine, where the thought of sabbatical came from, was my best friend Sean Stevenson died a few months prior. I had a breakup of a relationship, which was very disheartening and painful for me. I had another friend that died right after Sean Stevenson had died. And then the pandemic had started. And because I spend half my time, helping people with addictions and immersing myself in addiction recovery stuff and doing all the stuff that I do in that realm with my work time, I saw the world going into a very dark place. And then I had a friend who I actually got the term easy, lucrative, and fun from in the 90s, a guy named Mark. His son reached out to me on Instagram, of all things, and said, are you on WhatsApp? And I'm like, I don't use it that much, but he's like, can I call you? Because he was in Panama, and he's like, can I call you? And I'm like, sure. And so he calls me and lets me know that he had found his father, who was my friend Mark, in bed that morning. They'd found him dead at 59 years old, and Mark was worth $300 million. And I was like, something just popped in my, take a sabbatical. I didn't know why. And I was the last person from many years of being a workaholic that I would think, like, let me take a whole year off. And I made the decision that I would take an entire year off. And I had to come to the point that even if my business went away, even if it didn't matter, there was something inside of me that just wanted to do that. So how does that all tie into entrepreneurs that are too tightly scheduled cannot transform themselves? That's a conversation I have with Dan Sullivan all the time. He's a guy that created a company called Strategic Coach. We do a podcast together that we've been doing for over a decade now. And I started thinking about what was going on with the pandemic, reading a lot of stuff, watching stuff, looking at what I felt was planned, what I felt was dishonest, what I felt was I can explain which I'm not going to. I don't want to take too much time on it. I can explain the pandemic through the lens of addiction, and I just saw addiction at a much, much deeper level. I called up Hay House, which is a publisher of my book, and said to Reed, they wanted me to publish the book in 2021, and I said, I'm going to take a sabbatical. And they gave me a big advance. So I said, I'm happy to give the advance back. But they're like, no, we want you to do the book. And I took a sabbatical, and I ended up, in 2022, we ended up publishing the book around November. And I wrote a whole new book. I scrapped the whole original manuscript, and I had to look at all my relationships, and I did a really deep analysis of my self-esteem, my self-worth, and the book, even though it's a bunch of capabilities on how to develop relationships and meet people and make connections, and it's a whole book on connections. It's really it's a
good book.
Thank you. And it's a character book, though. Because there's a lot of people with capabilities that have shitty characters, and I think to answer your question on success is, what's your character, what's the output? Doesn't mean you're perfect. It just means you've taken the cards that you've been dealt and you've done the very best with it. And I really look at people like, what would Sean Stevenson do? He spent his life in a wheelchair. What would my friend Dave Kekich do? He's spent half his life in a wheelchair. He died recently. But it's like, there are people that have made incredible progress in the world, that have filled other people's lives with love and joy. And the sun, when the sun is out, is always there. And when the sun is not out, when it's dark, it's not. But when the sun is out, it's there. But oftentimes we don't see it because there's clouds in the way. So love is always there. Connection is always there. Joy is always there. There's just certain things that get in the way. So the not to-do list is more important than the to-do list. Many businesses die because they don't have enough customers. They die of starvation. But many people die of indigestion. We live in a world now where there's so much stuff to read and consume. And really the joy is found in the normal. It's in the boring. It's in the mundane. And the whole thing, I was going on that riff about passion. Mike Rose says, don't find your passion, bring your passion with you. Bring your passion into everything you're doing. What may suck for somebody if you can bring enthusiasm and you can bring a work ethic and you can bring progress into it, and not your bullshit ego and status into things, which is all bullshit. I mean, we have a mind that will taunt us and misinform us with, oh, go talk to this person. That person may not be very good. And if you lay down with dogs, you wake up with fleas. Don't sell anything to anyone that you would not sell to your best friend or your mother, assuming you liked your mother, right? So take care of people. Don't be an asshole. That one of the best pieces of advice I learned, how do you help your community? Be nice to the people you meet on the way up. They're the same people you meet on the way down. Be a contributor to your society. You want heat out of the stove, or the fireplace, put in logs. You don't have an entitlement attitude.
Do you have a checklist of like to know? Like, do you have your own checklist to know a giver from a taker?
Well, here's what I would say with that, because of my book, What's in It for Them. At the end of every chapter, the written version, I actually have dominoes, and I think of things through how can I be a domino to other people? Because every one of us, if I asked you what is a book or a person or an event that was a positive domino to you, that you read a book or you talked to someone or you had something happen that entirely changed your perspective, your understanding, put you on a path of what you do today that has been very beneficial, that helped you with your health when your health was not so great. What are the dominoes? And so I always look for dominoes. And so I list at the end of every chapter of What's in It for Them, domino exercises. And I actually have lessons that I've people wanted to learn, what did I get out of my sabbatical? So I set up joesabbatical.com. And I set it up before I went on a sabbatical because I didn't want people asking me what was I going to do for my sabbatical, because I didn't have a plan for it. What I knew is it wasn't an outward journey of going and traveling someplace. We're in the middle of a damn pandemic. It wasn't sitting in a hammock and relaxing. It was an inward journey. I didn't want to go outward. I wanted to go inward. I wanted to smoke out every part of me that required external validation to feel okay with myself. Because if no one's around, I can be connected and I can be surrounded by people and feel very lonely. Why? What is that? That wasn't coming from the outside. That was coming from the inside. So the things that, as far as a checklist, physical health, I mean, you got to have some sort of practice. If anything I've said resonates with anyone related to addiction recovery, if you need help, just go to Genius Recovery. There's nothing for sale there. It's free. And it's educational stuff. You can watch interviews with Gabor Mate. You can watch interviews I've done with really brilliant minds. You can read the Ken Wells blog. There's links to every sort of type of addiction recovery meeting that a person can find worldwide. It may not have every listing of where they're at, but I'll have the main categories of where people can go find meetings. And we're working on putting together recovery kits. That'll be one of our next projects. I'm funding a 3-year research study on connection and addiction with Stanford, with Professor BJ Fogg, who's one of his students created Instagram. So BJ, one of his students, made the movie The Social Dilemma. So BJ's a brilliant guy, and so we're working to find how to take young people that are disconnected and struggling and find what helps them with connection, and whatever we find in that research, we want to share it with the world for free. So one of the ways that people can help their community and help themselves is think of the dominoes in your life. Who are the people that have been the most significant? Tell them thank you. Spend more time with them. Hang out with them. Be the person you want to answer the phone for. I say this as a test. Look at the next 10 calls or text messages or social media or whatever direct messages come to you, and say, do I feel woo when this person calls, or do I feel ah? And why do you feel woo for one person and ah for another? And I'll always caution people, if you owe somebody money, they're not the asshole. You need to pay them the money back if that's the case. So, or at least apologize or say, I know I owe you money, but I'm doing my best. Don't ignore things. Rotting food in a refrigerator doesn't get better with age. It gets worse. So be a easy, lucrative, and fun person. And if money's not involved, be an easy, liberating, and fun person. Okay? Because I use elf versus half. Am I being elf, or am I being hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating, or hard, annoying, lucrative, and frustrating? Don't do things that eat at your soul. if we all want something. Every person listening to this wants something: insight, awareness, entertainment, whatever. uh, I'm going to want lunch here in a little bit, based on where I'm at, and I think you need to go to bed soon. I think because based on the times difference here. But
But Joe, most people are takers, Joe.
well, in some
Don't you
categories.
don't you agree?
Well,
Don't you agree that most people are takers?
I think I think
They're
there's
not givers until they want something. They're mainly takers.
well, here's the thing. I have no way of knowing how to look at the sea of humanity and know out of all of them what their atmospheric condition or life situations are that would cause one person to be a giver, a taker, or like, let's take the categories of toxic people: narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths, people that are, most narcissism. And I've interviewed, Ramani Durvasula, who's one of the world's top narcissist experts. She's a good friend of mine. uh, Most narcissism comes from pain and trauma, and it manifests itself that way. I don't believe most children are born and they instantly become a parasitical, selfish taker. I think their environment, that's what's so dangerous about, you know, what we're witnessing in many parts of the world right now is you have some of the most narcissistic, psychopathic, empathy lacking leaders that are,
Yes, we do.
you know, in high positions, making money and having high status. And then people become hopeless because they're like, why be a giver? Why be this nice person when I see these assholes over here making all this money, getting all this advantage? But I'll tell you, I believe in karma. And some people's purpose in life, everyone has a purpose in life. And some people's purpose in life is to serve as a bad example and be able to make the distinction between who's being an asshole and who isn't. And so we all want something. So make sure that your give is equal to or greater than your want. And that's how you get people to like you, want to associate with you, and you feel good about it. See, the worst thing about being a taker is you have to keep this con job going in your head of, oh, if I can just convince people. There's a lot of people that sound really sweet and really nice, but look at who they are. Like, who becomes a dear friend of mine, inner circle friend of mine? You can build rapport with someone relatively quickly. Trust takes a little bit longer. And there are people that you don't even find out till oftentimes years later that they're kind of scummy humans or outright just massive takers. And narcissists are really good at fooling people. Sociopaths, at least the smart ones, because there's dumb ones too. But the thing is that, who becomes an inner circle part of my life as I look at people that are more powerful. How do they treat people that are less powerful than them? Are they courteous? Do they say thank you when someone holds a door open? Are they nice to everyone above them that they want to curry favor with, and they're real mean to their staff? Or, they talk down at people. It's like, I want people that have situational behavior, but not situational ethics. And what I mean by that is, you can tell dirty jokes with some of your friends that but you're not going to do that maybe to someone's grandma that you just met. I mean, that's smart. That's not making you a good or bad person. What makes something good or bad is if you have situational ethics, where you try to act like you're a really integrous person while you're scamming someone on the side. So, like, you know, I tell this story, like, back in the day when people would go up to movie theaters with cash, and many people buy tickets for movies online now, right? And they never even interact with hardly anyone.
Totally. Yeah, it's changed so much.
Like, people talking in store, but it's so I tell the story about a father with his 12-year-old and 13-year-old son in this movie theater. The adult is 13 years old and children are 12 and under, right? And the father goes up with his 12 and 13-year-old son and says, I'd like two adult tickets and one child. And the guy behind the counter is like, well, how old's your son? He's like 13. He's like, well, sir, you could have got two tickets for children and got a discount because I wouldn't have known that he was 13 years old. He goes, well, you wouldn't have known, but he would have known. And that's the key. You don't freaking steal, even if you can get away with
Yeah.
it. Because every time you steal from others, every time you lie, and look, I
Yeah.
mean, lying's a difficult thing. Jordan Peterson, who I've met recently, I like what he says about lying. He's, one of the chapters of his book is, he talks about this where it's like, don't, tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Right. So, and oftentimes we lie by omission. We try to make someone out to be better or worse than they actually are, or we're giving our frame a rest for it. And, look, humans are just trying to get through life, trying to do their best they can. Give them.
But also we lie because we don't want people to feel pain, and sometimes we don't want to offend, so we lie. So there's various different degrees to lying. But do you think a lie is just a lie, or do you think there's degrees to lying and some are harmless?
Well, yeah, we could spend, that's one of those complex questions where, like, if you're, Nazi Germany, you're hiding someone that they want to find and kill in your basement. Do you tell the truth and say, oh, yeah, they're that? Well,
Yeah.
you have to make that sort of decision. And I have a Genius Network member named Lisa Sini, and she builds really conscious assisted living homes. And she gave a 10-minute talk at Genius Network. If you love me, lie to me. And it was a really weird reaction. Like, half the people are like, what the hell is this going to be about? And her whole thing there's certain people that are dying in assisted living homes that have dementia that you almost need to treat like children. And if you tell them the direness of their condition, you will take all of the joy out of them. So in that particular case, you don't. And it was really interesting to hear her framing, because she sold most of the people on it as a good concept, but there were a couple people there that's like, man, I have to really think about this one. But and here's the thing, like, and I'll go back to Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson says some questions you can't just easily answer. Some questions take hours to answer. Some take weeks, some take years, some take generations. There are some questions, even some that you asked me today that, I don't know if I gave the best answers to, but I do my best to try to contemplate them. And at the end of the day, I think you'll accomplish more through moving in a conscious direction. One of the best ways to progress is to understand that all the pain and all of the difficulties in your life are actually the raw ingredients to have a better life. My friend Dan Sullivan says, all the obstacles that seem to oppose our goals are actually the raw material for achieving them. Almost every breakthrough that we're going to have in life is going to come out of an area of life that does not work. What I'll say to entrepreneurs all the time, look at the business that you're in. Look at what is a business. A business is solving problems for a profit. Some people are in the business of selling problems, which makes them what I don't consider good entrepreneurs. So all of the problems in the world, all of the pain, all of the suffering, on a personal level, that's life's greatest teacher. That's life's way of saying, hey, find someone else who's in pain. Think about what's in it for them. Approach them with that question, not what's in it for you. If you approach people with one in it for them, genuinely, not superficially, not bullshit flattery, even though flattery works, it's like cotton candy. It's not real nutrition. So approaching people with what's in it for them and being genuine about it is where you'll get real friends, not deal friends. And a lot of people, their whole life is just deal friends because they're always in deal mode. They're always in like hustling, right? And yeah, there's a time where you hustle. There's a time where you sell. I mean, of course, you're gonna. And when I say hustle, let me define that. I don't mean hustling by conning people. I mean just working with hard work.
Yeah.
Now, if that's your whole modus operandi, you're going to burn yourself out. I mean, it's only a matter of time, and you can go for a long time, but people that really burn themselves out, they just are not noticing all of the pain. They're numbing it, and that's when people get mired in addiction because they are ignoring the pain signals and they keep trying to numb it. They keep trying to numb it, and they find an alternative way to do it. So if you go through life with the intention of noticing all the problems in the world are your greatest opportunities for yourself and others. Wherever there's anxiety, there's opportunity. And if you can solve problems for a profit, you can not only change a lot of lives, you can make a lot of money. And so people wake up and they're like, I want to not have any problems in my life. Well, that's bullshit and delusional. Because what I've learned about success, the things that would have killed me when I was a dead broke carpet cleaner living off credit cards, which is where I started, and I had 2 years of massive suffering, went deeply into debt. I was just recently sober from doing drugs. I still had not dealt with the underlying traumas. So I still went and, I spent many years in sexual addiction, and I, didn't say anything about it. And I had a ton of shame, and I figured out how to make money. And I was a millionaire before the age of 30 and all of that sort of stuff, but I was still in constant pain and angst. And I now look back at all of that and saying, you know what? It never made sense to me when people in 12-step groups would say, your addiction is a gift. And if you get through and you do the work, you'll realize that the gifts of recovery. And I'm like, the gifts of recovery? How on earth could all of this bullshit be a gift? And I actually understand what that means now, because I would not have the compassion or the empathy or the things that I do now. If I would have had a great childhood, maybe it would have been better. But I can't go back and change the past. I wish I could. If I could, I would have not had those things happen to me. But now I don't want, it's like you will not regret the past or wish to shut a door on it. I don't any longer. I actually like the person I am. And in many cases, I love the person I am. And I didn't have that for most of my life. And that came from just sticking with it, doing a lot of work, showing up and finding people who believed in me more than I believed in myself. And those people are out there, but only if you get your foot out the door. The heaviest weight you're going to lift is the front door sometimes. And the heaviest thing you're going to do is pick up the phone and call somebody and just say, I'm struggling, I need help. And you seek out and find people, and if you don't have any friends or anyone right now and you feel utterly alone, go to a 12-step group, go to a support group. They're out there all over the place. And if you're in a small town, small location, happen to live in a country where there's a dictator, if you can at least get online. And even if you're in a situation like that, all I can say is that, the sun is there, there's a lot of clouds. And if you can at least just, appreciate the fact that you've got vision, if you can see, hearing, if you can hear, the ability to talk, if you can talk, those are tools. If you can walk and use your hands, I'll say to entrepreneurs, young people, I did this a couple of weeks ago. I was in a room of the top 10% of the most successful real estate agents in Canada by a guy named Richard Robbins, he has a big coaching group. And I said, let me share something that I usually share with young entrepreneurs that are just trying to build and grow a business. Anyone here in the room worth $1 million? Whole bunch of hands went up because there's a lot of successful people in that room. Anyone here worth, 5 million? A few hands. Anyone 10 million or more? Hands go up. I go, but there's a lot of people who didn't raise their hands that weren't millionaires. And I said, how many of you here would like me to give you $1 million? Bunch of hands go up. I'm like, okay, anyone here be willing to pluck out one of your eyeballs for $1 million? And one person jokingly is like, yeah, I'll do it. And I go, you really would? I said, you're fucking crazy. This is the first time I've had someone do that. And they're like, no, they're not going to. And then I said, anyone, pluck out an eyeball for 5 million, 10 million? No one's raising their hand. I go, anyone cut off one of your legs for $50 million? I go, think about it. So y'all want to be worth $1 million. And I said it as a trick. But you already have something you wouldn't trade $1 million for. It's called your vision. It's called your ability to talk, your ability to walk. Do you know how many people that don't have those things that are laid up in a hospital bed? It would be a dream come true. Don't take it for granted. When you think your life sucks, it really doesn't suck, depending on the perspective you have. Yeah, and if you're a woman that's in a relationship with someone beating you, and I've had lots of conversation with women that are in abusive relationships, it's work. You have to unravel it. You are oftentimes in danger. You have to go through toxic narcissists and deal with people that are really traumatized, that are taking their pain on other people. There are difficult life challenges. However, there's always hope. The sun is always there. And sometimes what seems like the worst thing, find the dominoes, be the domino, be the person as much as you can to resource yourself. When you don't have any hope, find someone that has hope for you. Hope is a tricky thing. Hope used in the right way heals. False hope is really destructive. There are people that use hope to manipulate and they lie. So you got to take all of this in context. But the thing is like, we are the most important asset in our own lives. Take care of the asset you have. Invest it wisely. Don't squander it. Remove yourself as much as you can from toxic people, and it's a little bit every day. Consistency is more important than having a grandmaster, change. I mean, just a little bit of exercise, If you have trouble meditating, start for 30 seconds or a minute a day. Do cold plunges. If you feel shitty, take a cold shower. You'll get a 200% dopamine increase. If people like, what do you do? I mean, you asked me to, shoot a video. I did a couple minutes today just driving, but I will, I
Can't wait to get it.
I'll record some things, and some of it might just be me talking about things that I do.
Perfect. That's fine.
Yeah.
I you talk a lot about hanging out with just the givers and really trying to omit the takers from your life. Now, this is like I've been curious about this. So throughout your journey, like, have there been any significant relationships or mentors that have really played this like crucial role in shaping your personal and professional development? It could be anyone recent, it could be during your journey, like people that you really feel have really created that massive impact as a mentor in your life.
Yeah, I mean, most of it was business stuff. Most of my mentors early on were like through audio programs. Earl Nightingale, who one of my favorite audio programs is Lead the Field. That was recorded years ago. It's funny because I've recently interviewed Earl Nightingale's wife, and I created a program for Nightingale Conant, which was in 2004, and it was the number one selling marketing program of all time for Nightingale Conant, which is now has all of their information licensed to Audible, which people can listen to my marketing program there if they wanted to, even though it was recorded, damn near 20 years ago. So Dan Sullivan, who I do the 10X Talk podcast with, he's a founder of Strategic Coach. He's been very instrumental, and I've been pretty instrumental to him too. It's kind of cool. It's like when people that you really help, that have helped you, you're able to help them. For marketing, I learned marketing from a crazy guy named Gary Halbert, who was awesome. Dave Kekich, who's passed away. Sean Stevenson, who passed away. My friend Dr. Janice Dorn, who was a really wonderful human who had a double PhD, was a world-class psychiatrist who became addicted to Demerol and became a really just bad addict. And she was found with a broken jaw a week later, laying on her bathroom floor, 73 pounds, and she still survived. And,
Wow.
And it was this, I mean, talk about just being on the absolute brink of death and being able to come out of that situation. And so she was instrumental. She was a great coach for me for many years. And then I was her caretaker when she was dying a few years ago with her friend Lisa. So it's interesting how life changes. So oftentimes the people that take care of you, you end up taking care of them. So most of my mentors and stuff came through books and stuff. But yeah, those are a handful of the people. And I do my best to acknowledge those people and carry on their work and their lessons, because 3 ways to learn something. And this is probably nothing new to you, Mary. I'll just say it for the people that are listening is, one way to learn something is you go through the school of hard knocks. You just go and get beat up and you get bloodied and you bumble your way through life, and you'll figure some stuff out and you'll have a lot of pain in the process, but you'll learn shit. A second way to learn is you learn through the experiences of other people. You read their books, you listen to their podcasts, you go to their seminars, you seek them out, you develop, genuine relationships. You don't just say, can I pick your brain? That's like asking someone to pick their pocket. What you want to do is you want to offer something for value in exchange for them sharing things, and you pay attention and you implement it. Because there's that Emerson quote, I think it is, where people ask for a new idea when they haven't used the first one that I gave you. And so when someone offers you advice or opportunity, utilize it. Don't use people, utilize people. I don't want to be used. No one wants to be used. I want to be utilized. And so you learn through the experiences of other people. And then the third and most effective way to learn is you teach other people. Because once you learn something, you share it with other people, which is different than plagiarizing someone's work. It's sharing what it is you learned, citing, acknowledging people for it. And here's one thing that I find kind of funny is that a lot of my male friends, some that are very famous because of their followings online, the ones that, it's mostly men, but it is some women too, when they have not dealt with their shit, what a lot of them do is they start a podcast and they somehow think that starting a podcast is the same as doing the deep work. And it is helpful because when you do a
But
podcast,
it's super helpful. It's super helpful because you like listen to all of these people who really dealt with a lot of shit.
yeah. And
You know, you
totally,
learn, you grow,
it's
you
it,
grow.
it's a good way to do it. And I always say to people is when you're listening to stuff and when you're doing stuff, there is stuff that is your own work that the world never sees, and you might be crying in your arms, and you might be, have your, drooling and your nose running and all kinds of stuff. But there is a time where if you have a lot of pain, uh, you process it and you deal with it. And if you do that and you make that part of your life, you will become more compassionate, you will become more empathetic, not just to others but yourself. And forgiveness is a tricky word. My favorite way to think about forgiveness is giving up the hope that one day you're going to have a better past. So all of the shit that happened to you in your past is just the R&D experiment that life served you. You're not going to go back and change it. You're either winning or you're learning. What you can do is you can take the lessons from the past. The past, comparison is an interesting thing. It's how you compare. Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan wrote a book called The Gap and the Gain, and people are like, well, I want to reach my potential. Well, potential means you just haven't done it yet. Everybody has potential, but some people actually reach it. So the way that I think about it is that, your past has given you, if you compare like what you don't have to what other people have that you think is better than what you have, you're going to be miserable. But if you compare what you do have, like I have my vision, I have my ability to walk, I have my ability to talk, I have, maybe even if you only have one or two friends, some people have many friends, other people are super lonely. Some people have been single and isolated for a long time. But it's with that where you're like, okay, this was stage one of my life. Now it's time to go to stage two and latch on to something or someone that can help get you to that, even if you feel incredibly unmotivated. Like one of the things, I like recommending certain books. My favorite book that I've referred more than any other book is by my friend Stephen Pressfield. He wrote a book called The War of Art. And, that's great. It's about resistance. And whenever someone's like, how do I tell them, read The War of Art, watch my YouTube interview with me and Dan Sullivan and Stephen Pressfield. That's really great. The Dopamine Nation, if you, Dr. Anna Lembke, who's actually going to be coming to my Genius Network annual event this year. I also have somebody who's coming. I won't announce who it is yet, but I have someone who's going to be running for president of the United States coming to my annual event this upcoming year. So we'll see if they win or not.
That's cool.
But yeah, I've smart people that come to my events. I have this shirt that says Genius Network on it. I am not a genius. If there's anything smart that I've done, I just bring geniuses together and let them talk, meet each other and stuff. So I really run connection networks, which is funny because I was one of the most disconnected, shy, introverted kids. And, here I am.
That's what makes your story so incredible, is because that's where you came from and this is who you are today. So that's the reason why it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, and I hope that I can let people know that there's nothing unique about this, that I think a lot of people, if not most people, have the ability to be deeper connected. And I don't want any of this to be like I have some sort of special thing. I mean, that's I think everyone, and I know, and I believe in my soul that everyone can make pretty big improvements and can change their life and stuff. So I was going to say, so Dopamine Nation. So Anna Lembke, I've got her coming to my event. And she's been on Joe Rogan's podcast. She's been on Andrew Huberman. She's very smart. I'm going to be interviewing her at my event. And what I've learned through her is that we are dopamine seeking creatures. And if you take dopamine out of a rat that is starving and put the rat or the mouse in front of food, it doesn't even have the motivation to eat it. It will just simply starve to death. So much of what we're doing is biochemical, and that's where food and nutrition and fitness and fixing your gut and exercise and flow and connection and community, all these things play into this. And cold plunges and saunas have become a big thing. Wim Hof has popularized it more than probably anyone. And I've got James Nestor, who wrote the book Breath, is a good friend of mine. And breathing, cold therapy, heat therapy. Most of these things are very little cost. If you don't have a cold plunge, you can take cold showers. You can do a lot of physical exercise that'll heat up your body. But I started cold plunging and doing saunas. It was at the end of 2021. And so there is nothing in the last 10 years that has done more to help me with anxiety than freaking cold therapy. And I hated it. I used to hate the cold. And I live in Arizona, and right now it's over 108 degrees out right now.
How long are you doing it for? How long can you survive in there?
Oh, I don't try to see how long I could survive, but the longest I've been in, 40 degrees is 13 minutes. But, I'll do, I have a video on my Instagram of me and talking totally normal in a tub, which we have the temperature 32 degrees, totally freezing.
That's pretty. It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
And I never thought I'd be able to do that, but it's not that you can't do it. It's you become heat adapted and cold adapted. And so the reason I bring that up, and I'm not, it's almost gotten to the point where it's trendy. I remember reading something online. It's like, I'm getting so sick of hearing all these people talk about cold plunging or saunas or heat. Like try being homeless like I was for a period of time. You'll know what cold and heat is like.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of funny. But at the same time, there's all these little things that can change the biochemistry. And chocolate is a 55% increase in dopamine. Sex is 150%. Cold plunges are 200%. Cocaine is 225%. Methamphetamines is 1,000% dopamine hit. It makes sense why people do drugs and drink alcohol and stare at the internet. So when you're staring at a phone, which actually I have a team meeting in like a few minutes here. But when you're staring at a phone, you're getting a constant dopamine hit. So whatever you do in your life, find healthy forms of getting into a flow state and biochemistry. And there's a lot of things that you might be like, I can never do that. I can never do that. And I'm like, you know what? You're probably scared, and that's okay. And you've probably not done it before, but there's all kinds of ways to learn stuff. Breathing, meditation, any sort of somatic therapy. I have one of my Genius Network members. I got her doing yoga every day for like going on 3 weeks now. And she's like, it's transformed her life. I mean, she's like, I never would have thought. And I tried it before, but I didn't really like it. I went onto an app that in America, called Mind Body, and I found a studio that was close to her. And I said, consistently do it. And it's like gyms work, breathing works, all these things work. You might have to take different approaches. You got to understand there's a lot to learn, but keep learning, keep growing, keep applying, be a giver.
Joe, you're 55 now, right?
That is correct.
And you have never been married and you've never had any children, correct?
Correct.
Now, I feel like when we get a wound and it heals, and then it becomes a scar, it never really heals. So I just wanted to know from you, like, do you think that this has anything to do with your past experiences, or is it mainly a personal choice that you never had children or were never married?
Well, one of my biggest regrets was not having children. I actually raised a child for a year, and I found out through a DNA test 5 days before this child's first birthday that I was pursuing sole custody, that I was not the biological father, and that was in 1998, and that threw me into a world of addiction and promiscuity. And the only thing that made the pain go away, but I didn't know who to trust because I felt completely betrayed and I was a total mess. And it completely turned my life into a bit of a Jerry Springer show for a period of time. But now I've reacquainted myself years later with that, who's now a young man, this person, and doing my best to mentor him. And it's amazing how one of the most painful thing in my life at that time. And absolutely that had a lot to do with having kids and getting married. And, but I could regret it, or I can be like, it's just was my life and what happened. I now have a wonderful, amazing, loving, beautiful partner who's just a great human and my best friend. And so, I have a lot of clients that I think are like children, so that's another thing too. But you know, look,
Yeah, I think I feel the same too. I feel the same.
uh, there's definitely moments of sadness. There's definitely moments of I wish this, I wish that. But you know, it's like, look, I have a blessed life. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff too.
Yeah.
There's nothing's perfect, and you know, you got to play it where it lies, sort of thing. And you know, it's just all part of the life journey. I mean, it's all part of the life journey, and I'm able to take away a lot from it, and I have to find other forms of connection, and I can make a lot of married jokes to my married friends. Tell people, you know,
Yeah.
the number one cause of divorce, and they'll be like, well, what's in the finances? You know, I'm like, no, marriage. That's not
No.
cause of divorce. You
Yeah, I knew you were gonna say that. I knew you would say that.
yeah, so it's you know it's one of those things. So yeah, I grapple with it every once in a while, but for the most part. I wouldn't want to be anyone else. I wouldn't want anyone else's life. And there was a period of time where I didn't want my life. I didn't like it. I hated it. I felt out of control. And I'll tell you, you know, if you do the work, and when I say do the work, you're going to work harder not doing the work than doing the work. It's not that there's going to be
Yeah.
suffering or not. It's like Dan Sullivan says, there's two types of suffering in the world, short term or long term. You just decide which one you want. And, you know, short term suffering. And I don't like working out. I like the results of working out. I don't like always eating clean, but I like the results of eating clean. Right. And so that's life has this very interesting way of rewarding how you operate on a karmic level. And so you can look at other people's lives and you can waste that energy wishing you looked a certain way, had a certain thing, or you can just go about. We have way more ability to design a wonderful life than we often give ourselves credit for. It is amazing the amount of stuff that a person can do if they just spend a little bit of time each day resourcing themselves and learning a little bit more, applying a little bit more, and letting, you know, avoiding the kryptonites that are in their life and taking care of the $1 million racehorse. Let me say this is the last thing we'll talk about because people tend to like this one, and I use it not as a seminar speech, but as a way of doing my life, which is if you had a racehorse and it was you know, running in races that, you know, you would win, not to be confused with gambling addiction. So you had a racehorse, and every time the horse ran a race and won, you'd make $1 million. It was $1 million racehorse. The question is, how would you treat that horse? You would, well, what would you do? You'd have the best food, the best nutrition, the best training. You would give that horse rest and relaxation. You would have that horse in the right races. What would you not do? You wouldn't overtrain the horse. You wouldn't have the horse up till 3 a.m. watching porn and, you know, snorting crystal meth and smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol. You wouldn't have the horse hanging out with other negative losers. You wouldn't have the horse running on a track that was, you know, filled with broken glass and obstacles that made no sense. You would not have the horse in the wrong races. You know, you never win a race you don't want to be in, which is something my friend Nick Peterson says. So some games in life, the only way you win is you don't play. You would be very discerning about how that horse is taken care of, who that horse is around, what are the trainers. So the punchline here is you're the $1 million racehorse. You know, if you treat yourself like garbage, you're going to get garbage results. If you treat yourself like the $1 million racehorse, you're going to start winning some races. And if you become that type of way to yourself, other people will notice. You will become more attractive. You want to change the world, start with one person, then maybe 2, then maybe 5, and then maybe 10. You know, if you want to start a YouTube channel or a podcast, it's going to start slowly. But if you're consistent and you stay at it and you're very intentional, and you know, don't lie, you know, don't mislead people, honor and keep your word. Do the best you can. Maybe you're not going to be perfect, but live that way. Be the $1 million racehorse. Life is going to be better. And treat other people that are $1 million racehorses that way also. And deal with your shit. If you got any trauma and stuff, and if you know, and if there's anything that I put out into the world that's helpful, if, you know, I know we've spent like most of my business world is teaching people marketing and positioning and the ethical use of influence and persuasion. I mean, I run one of the highest level marketing groups in the world. We talked hardly about any of that stuff, and that's fine, because I would rather people take away, whatever life issues they're dealing with, friends and family, deal with that. I mean, if that comes first before any, your health, mental and physical, is way more important than making money. As a matter of fact, you're going to be handicapped for making money if you're constantly feeling like dog shit. And even if you have a lot of money, and I don't poo-poo money, I love money. People say money can't buy happiness. I buy happiness all the time. People that say money can't buy happiness, they haven't given enough of it away. So if anyone wants, like, most of the stuff I have that benefits people, I don't even charge for. My podcast, joesfreebook.com. I give away a book called Life Gives to the Giver. They can download that for free. I have a movie that's been put out, someone made about my life, called Connected, the Joe Polish story. They can find.
That was a pretty good movie.
Yeah, thank you. So that's sort of my.
That's a really good takeaway to end the podcast. And so thank you so much, Joe. I'm sure our listeners got so much out of that, just from a perspective of, there's there are two ways to go to what we sit down and have conversations with people, right? There's always the business side of it, the success side of it. But I think aside from all of these amazing things that people end up doing, I think the fundamental points of that is, where did they come from? And because that can serve as an inspiration for a lot of people out there who really want the lives that they look at on the outside, and they think that they're in this deep hole and they can't get out of it. But then, speaking to people like yourself and hearing about your story and how you've managed to really change your life 360 really serves as an inspiration to a lot of people who think that they can't get out of whatever they're in.
Yeah. No, well, good, and I appreciate it, and I do hope anything I've said is helpful. And I always like saying to people, today is the last day of the way you used to be. If you don't like the way you've been in the past, or at least some parts of it, and if you love who you are, just keep doing more of it. Because success is getting on track, staying on track, and you're going to go off track. And we all know this. Sometimes you're in great physical health and you get sick, or you just quit doing some of the things you do. So part of it is, I don't think, like, success is if you're doing certain things, and it's not anyone's job to tell you what success is. It's your job to develop your own philosophies in your own way and adhering to it. And that, if you can really feel yourself, what expands you versus what contracts you, and do the things that expand other people and don't do the things that contract other people. And you're not going to vibe with everyone. Everyone has their people. There's some people you get along with and you kind of have shared values, and there's others that you don't, and that's okay. You don't need to make sure everyone's happy. The main thing is to make sure that you are doing the best job that you can do, and keep doing it. And so I appreciate it, Mary, and I hope this was useful.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, so Mary, you wanted me to record a little bit of my morning ritual. Well, I'm in Arizona. It is the middle of July, so it is nice and hot out, even at 6:43 a.m. So I just left my house, and I am going to head to the gym and get a quick workout. But I will usually lift weights either at my house or at my office where I have a gym. Sometimes I'll do yoga. I go on yoga streaks where I'll do yoga either once a week, sometimes 3 times a week, and then I'll switch over to like hiking and things like that. But I definitely try to strength train at least 4 to 5 times a week. They're not super hardcore workouts. I used to do more of that when I was younger, but I'm 55 years old now, so I switch it up with other things too. So I do have a tonal and a Peloton and a thing called a Vasper at my office. I do saunas and cold plunges. If I had to take the last year and a half, I would average at least 5 times a week. There have been some periods of times where every single day I will do a sauna or a cold plunge, and if I'm traveling, I will still try to find a place where I can do it, or at least take cold showers. So that's always a great ritual, and it doesn't matter if it's morning, afternoon, or evening. I will still try to get those things in. I'm less about the specific time that you do that and more just consistency with doing it daily. So I'm getting ready to call my friend Ben Hardy, who's one of my Genius Network members and an author. And then I'm going to do my interview with you. And what else can I share with you? So I drive about 22 minutes from where I live to my office in Tempe, Arizona. And sometimes I'll be at my office. I'll be at my office maybe 2-3 times a week. Definitely there when I do my Genius Network meetings. But that's what's up. I spend a lot of time doing work just in other places like the public library, which I used to do a heck of a lot more of before the pandemic. And I also will meet at other friends' places or oftentimes at coffee shops and things like that. I'm getting a Sprinter van that I will have in the next, it's called a Storyteller Overland. And I'm literally going to turn that into a portable office and a podcast studio. So, and now I'm getting a call from Ben, so gotta go. Okay, Mary, I am in the gym. There's a couple different gyms I have memberships at, and I will work out usually, in a gym probably 4 times a week, unless I'm traveling. And I just do simple workouts, basic back and biceps today. Then I'll do chest, shoulders, and tries. Then I'll have a leg day. Then I'll have shoulders and abs, things like that. So it's pretty simple workouts, nothing too complicated. And I try not to be one of those people that film a bunch of people at the gym or actually use my phone except when I'm listening to music or iPods. Uh-oh, there's someone behind me. Anyway, that was his fault though, he walked behind me. So that's a little bit of my morning workout today. Okay, this is for my Genius Network members. I'm at Optimize right now. I've been in here for 2 minutes so far, 2 minutes and 18 seconds. This is pretty darn cold. How cold is it right now, Jesse?
This is 32 and probably less than 32 in some areas.
So it's pretty much freezing. So I know this seems crazy. I hated the cold until I started doing this daily. Now it's one of the best things I've ever done. So at some point at the Genius Network meeting, we're going to hold a Wim Hof workshop. We're going to show you how to do the breathing, the cold, all that, and it's a game changer. I know it sounds insane, but it's one of the many things we'll introduce you to if you don't already do this stuff. Okay, Mary, you wanted to know a little bit of my morning ritual. Well, I don't have a normal morning ritual probably ever because I do so many different things, but I do wake up, I do brush my teeth, I try to actually hop into either a sauna, exercise, yoga. So today, my buddy who has a place on the Strand, which is in Manhattan Beach in the LA area, we're gonna go jump in the ocean. It'll be the closest I can get to a cold plunge today since I'm out here for a couple days, and that's about to happen. But I'm not gonna film that. I might jump in that yellow truck also, but probably not. And that's it. I'm gonna leave my phone at the house, so it's not a good idea to take your phone into the ocean. Okay, so Mary also asked me what are some other things that I do in the morning. Well, the first thing I did today was, for the first time ever, I tried a Waymo driverless car. This is my second ride where it's taken me back home because I had to come out to a Capitol building in downtown Phoenix, Arizona, and I wanted to sit through a thing that they were doing on free speech. One of the senators actually gave me the Constitution, little printout of it, which is cool. So I do all kinds of things. One of them being getting in a driverless vehicle. And so I'll show you this again because it's pretty wild. So I'm gonna do a yoga class later today. I will do yoga sometimes 1 time a week, sometimes 3 times a week, and oftentimes I will go 3 weeks without doing yoga, but I go in streaks. I'll meditate about half of the week at this stage of my life. I've had periods where I was meditating every day, especially when I first got trained in Transcendental Meditation in 2013 in Fairfield, Iowa, where the Maharishi University is. And then what else do I do that would be helpful for people to know? Certainly eating clean, eating consistently, minimizing caffeine and sugar. It's so weird to be shooting a video here when no one's around. And if I was in an Uber, I don't think, or Lyft, or whatever sort of vehicles throughout the world people use, whatever services, I wouldn't feel as free to talk like this because I would be conscientious about somebody listening. So this is such an interesting, unique thing. What else could I share with you? I read every day. I've read over 1,000 books, mostly nonfiction, mostly about addiction recovery and marketing and building a business and getting into a state of flow. Some of my favorite books, The War of Art by my buddy Stephen Pressfield is wonderful. Obviously in the addiction space, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Anything by Dan Sullivan is really good. You know, there's a lot of stuff. And so what else? Tomorrow I will be doing a podcast episode with one of my Genius Network members named Tommy Mello for I Love Marketing. What else can I tell you? Yeah, and that's just some of my day. I check in with my team. I have 14 full-time team members in Genius Network, and I also have equity in over 20 different companies. So throughout all the different companies, I will oftentimes check in with the different ones. I own a 40-acre ghost town called Cleator, Arizona, so I have a couple of partners in that. I have a VR company that is an educational platform, which is really cool. And so that's just some of the stuff I'm up to in my backseat of, you know, and what's funny, I drive a Tesla, but I didn't want to go to this place where it would have been hard to park today. And so I decided to try this Waymo, which is what it's called. And so far I like it. I could see this being quite a productive thing to do. And it feels safe. That's the number one question. When I posted on my Instagram earlier, people were asking me, does it feel safe? And so right there it was like slowing down because it thought someone was going to go and you know, hit the car. It was really wild. So other than that, was the first time I had some sort of, you know, just it put on the brakes. And I've driven in this probably, I don't know, I would say 20 miles, 25 miles so far. So that's what's up. Have a good day.
Thank you so much for watching this episode. I really hope that it added a lot of value to your life. Please like, subscribe, and share this to as many individuals that you think might impact their lives too. See you in the next episode.